Hi, welcome. My name is John Kelly. I'm a columnist at the Washington Post. Washington Post is a founding sponsor of the festival. Seanan McGuire is the Alex, Nebula, and Hugo award-winning author behind the October Daye urban fantasy series, the InCryptid series, and other works. She also writes darker fiction as Mira Grant. Her latest book is Middlegame, a standalone fantasy which introduces readers to a world of amoral alchemy, shadowy organizations, and impossible cities. A world where twins Roger and Dodger are created to, well, you'll just have to read the book to see what they're created to do. Roger and Dodger, I like saying that, Roger and Dodger. It feels nice on the tongue, but a lot of things that Seanan writes do. Titles, Pocket Apocalypse, Dusk or Dark or Dawn or Day, Snake in the Glass. I like her words, and I read a short story this week called The Myth of Rain. It's about it's about to be a post-apocalyptic world, and it's pretty serious stuff, but there's a line in there where the protagonist says, "Get on the comm and call everybody. I don't care if they're ass deep in pine martens." And I just like that line. I don't care if they're ass deep in pine martens. A character in her new book, Middlegame, says, "Numbers are simple, obedient things. Words are trickier. They twist and bite and require too much attention." Please join me in paying attention to Seanan McGuire.
Hello, everybody. I'm Seanan. I was given absolutely no instructions about what to do up here, just a microphone, which is really a very dangerous choice to make in this world. That's not smart, y'all. That's not smart. I do not blame the book festival. My publicist set this up while I was in Ireland. The book festival is lovely. Everyone has been very charming here, and I'm enjoying it. I especially enjoy that everyone gets a water trap. Good ASL interpreters are difficult to find, and I have been having a really lovely time observing the ones here. I cannot observe mine, but I will not be cruel to him. So the best thing about the Middlegame tour and about Middlegame as a whole has been that it is my best reviewed book ever. It is the most consistently well-reviewed book I have written, better even than Feed and Every Heart a Doorway. And because of the nature of the world it presents, I get to watch all of these very serious reviewers talking about my very serious work, having to say, and the main characters are named Roger and Dodger, over and over again. And that was very intentional, though I couldn't predict the reviews I'd get. So I'm here to talk to y'all, but I don't really know what you want to hear me talk about. Does anyone have any suggestions?
The new October Daye book coming out.
The next October Daye book, which is called The Unkindest Tide, comes out on Tuesday, and it is number 13 in the series, which is ridiculous. It is, how did we do that? And the answer is one volume at a time. Sometimes I kind of whimper thinking about how many words that represents, because the books average about 108,000. So you now have to read over 1 million words if you want to get caught up on Toby, which is so many words. That's so many, and I wrote all of them at least 6 times. Toby is named after a girl I went to high school with whose name was October Blaze, which is even more of a stripper name than October Daye. And she would, in fact, introduce herself by saying, "Call me Toby or I'll punch you in the throat." I miss her. She was charming. Some folks seem to think that The Unkindest Tide is the last Toby book because the others are not on Amazon yet, even though Amazon does not update that quickly. We're under contract for 5 more after this. Yeah, so we're going at least through 18, and the plan is not currently to finish there. Daye is very patient with me. Very patient. Dear God, so patient. That's about all I can say right now because the book isn't out. And I know we all think we want spoilers, but we don't. We really don't. It's not as much fun when you don't get surprised. Does anybody have anything else? What? That's not up to me. So one of the exciting things about being a traditionally published author, which means I write a book and a publisher takes it and they take care of all of the work of making it something you actually want to read and they get it on shelves. And I couldn't write 6 books a year if I wasn't traditionally published. I wouldn't have the time. Is they decide what I get a contract for. Orbit, which publishes the Mira Grant books, they published the News Flesh series, and they published Parasitology, and they published Into the Drowning Deep, and does not currently have me under contract for any further books. If you want to see more News Flesh, or if you want to see Out of the Swallowing Sea, which is the sequel to Into the Drowning Deep, you need to tell Orbit. And I know that sounds a little bit like I'm putting responsibility for my career on you, but at the end of the day, they don't listen to me. When I say, no, really, readers want to see more Masons, it's kind of like a 6-year-old saying, no, really, Daddy said I could have a cookie. I have no credibility if I'm telling them that they should pay me money. Comic books. I also work for Marvel. I am the current author of Gos Spider, which is the continuing adventures of Gwen Stacy, the Spider-Woman of Earth 65. Issue 1 just came out. We previously did a 10-issue run on Spider-Gwen, Ghost Spider, but that concluded, and we got a little bit relaunched. It's the same exact creative team. It's continuing the stories we were telling previously. We just have a new title. I've gotten yelled at quite a bit for that because we don't like relaunches around here, and my response is generally, well, then you should have bought the book. Because a relaunch means they didn't have the sales to keep the series going. The fact that they kept our entire creative team means that they still have a lot of faith in the stories that we have to tell. Gwen Stacy was Spider-Man's first girlfriend, and she was killed in the 1970s when the Green Goblin chucked her off a bridge. When I say the Green Goblin, what I really mean is Marvel editorial, because most decisions to kill female characters are made by male editors. She was chucked off a bridge, Spider-Man tried to catch her, and the web caught her ankle and her neck snapped on the rebound. And that's why you shouldn't bungee jump without a harness. In 2014, Jason Latour and Robbie Rodriguez were hired to write for the Into the SpiderVerse event, which you may recognize that title because it became the title of the recent animated feature. And they decided, wouldn't it be cool if there were a reality where Gwen Stacy had been the one to be bitten by the radioactive spider and become Spider-Woman? So they brought Gwen back to life. I did not read those initial issues because Gwen Stacy is very near and dear to my heart. The death of Gwen is why I stopped reading Spider-Man comics. She died before I was born, but I grew up on welfare, so I was about 10 years behind in what comics I could have access to. And when I hit that issue for the first time, I literally could not believe it. I couldn't intellectualize it at all. I had the reaction every comic author wants, which I just sat there sobbing because Gwen was dead. And I knew Gwen wouldn't come back because I already knew, even at 7, that the women never came back to life. So I really did look at the Gwen Stacy Spider-Woman as a gimmick, as something they were going to do for 5 minutes and then throw away and never be seen again. Plus, she was being written by 2 dudes, and I didn't have a lot of faith in that. So I hadn't read them when Marvel called me and said, do you want to write Spider-Gwen? And it really was. I had agreed to take a call with the Spider office, even though I wanted to work for the X office, figuring nothing would come of it. And the editor said, are you interested in writing Gwen? And I lost all hearing for about 5 minutes. Like, there's a gap, at the end of which I went, I think that would be very nice, thank you. Okay, and pretty much hung up on them. And then I went and laid in my bed and cried for about an hour, and that was super fun. We had a great day. And it's been really joyful. It's been a wonderful experience. I love my editorial team. I love my artists. For about 5 minutes, when Rosie Camp was drawing the first 4 issues, we were the only all-female creative team in the Spider office. We are not anymore, but we are the only female-led creative team in the Spider office. And it's super great, and we're having a wonderful time. And Into the Spider-Verse has put Gwen's profile higher than ever. But if you want to see a female lead continuing in the Spider universe, and you like comic books, you should please buy them. I know, again, my career on your shoulders, but Marvel doesn't listen to me that much, and I can only afford to buy about 30 copies of every issue. My house is so full of comic books, y'all. There are just so many. And this is the ASL for Spider-Man, which is great. There are regional differences. I also have done some X-Men work, though not as much because Jonathan Hickman has taken over the entire X line. So right now there are no other authors working there. I'm hoping to pick up another X title in the future. Oh, if people want to go to the microphones, that's cool. We've been doing less questions and more topics, but I'm happy to take questions. I do very well with Q&A. I like Q&A. I would have prepared a speech if anyone had told me we were supposed to be speechifying, and I could do you a speech about my cats, but I don't think that would be very interesting for most of y'all. They are so happy with their new catio. About 3 weeks ago, I had a catio built on my back deck, which is an enclosed space so the cats can go outside. Yeah, they don't come inside anymore. But it's great because one of my housemates is allergic to cats, and they do all their shedding in the backyard. She thinks this is wonderful. Hello.
Oh, hi. I'm a huge fan of your work.
Thank you.
So I have a question, and then I have a topic for you, if that would work.
Okay, cool.
First a question, are there any plans to continue the story of Middlegame, or is it very much standalone?
I really love how people keep using this word standalone, like that's something I'm capable of. Like, in 2010, when Worldcon was in Australia, I really wanted to go, and I did the math and figured out that I needed to save $4.43 a day to afford it. So I sold daily sponsorships on my LiveJournal. For $4.43, you could have me write about whatever you wanted for a day. And the very first sponsorship was from an anonymous source that called themselves the Crayfish Minions. I still don't know who that was. And I decided that the reasonable financial decision on my part would be to write them an 8,000-word short story, which turned into the Velveteen series. There are 3 volumes of that published. Like, I don't do standalone. It's not in my DNA. So there are certainly plans.
Okay, and then a topic. You've had some really fun, crazy animal stories on your Twitter, like the emu. Have any more?
I miss Gus. He was a good emu. He was also delicious. So if you ever encounter a wacky animal story that I have told, they are all completely true, and most of them have no photo documentation, because I don't know about you, but when a rattlesnake has latched onto my ass, I'm not reaching for a camera. Like, I care less about proving myself to people in the future than I do about not dying in the moment. Also, a lot of my worst stories happened when I was a teenager, and that was before the advent of camera-compatible cell phones. I was just recently in Ireland, and Ireland has a lovely river in the middle of Dublin called the Liffey, and the Liffey is covered in swans. So many swans. And if you followed my animal stories for a while, you're probably aware that one of my favorite things to do is pick up waterfowl. Picking up waterfowl is a wonderful way to spend an afternoon. It's fun for you, it's fun for the waterfowl, it's deeply confusing for everyone around you. Everybody wins. So on our second day in Ireland, I decided that the best thing to do would be to feed a large chunk of espresso cake to a swan. So now I have a hyper-caffeinated swan. What I did not realize was that I had lured this swan out of the pit of teenage swan angst. There are like 6 swans just hanging out in this little lovey going, sup. So the swan comes out of the water, just plap, 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 plap. And as I do, I go over and pick up the swan. The way you pick up a swan is don't. But if you must, the way you pick up a swan is you position yourself so as to pin both wings, and you hold it like it's a corgi. You don't want to nestle it like you would a duck or a chicken. You don't want to give it a roosting space, because then it gets bored, and once it's bored, it's not confused anymore. But if you pin its wings like you're holding a corgi that has the potential to peck your eyes out, the swan will be very baffled, and it will stick its long snake-like neck up in the air and just look at stuff. And then if you're lucky, it will decide to start doing your hair for you. And this kind of hurts because swans don't understand pressure, so now you have a swan pulling your hair. But if you let go of the swan will no longer be in your arms, and that is bad. So I'm standing next to the River Liffey holding a swan, and a cyclist comes up and stops. And in a thick Irish accent, which I will not attempt to replicate because that would be mockery, says, That's a swan you've got there. Yeah, it is. You know, in England, they belong to the Queen. I did know that. Over here, they don't. We fought a war about it. That's cool. So, you're not breaking any laws, and then he cycles off. I did eventually chuck the swan back in the Liffey, and it flapped its wings at me in an offended manner and, went off.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. Ooh. Hello.
Hi. I was just wondering about when you said you wrote for Gos Spider, would you recommend going back to the first 10 original issues and before starting the new series?
The new series is meant to be accessible, so you can start there. I would recommend going back to the 10 issues because, of course, I would recommend that. The first 4 have been collected in trade paperback. The next 6 will be collected in trade paperback in September, and it looks really good for Marvel if they see that the trades are selling. They're more inclined to give me more work when they assume it'll make them money.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
I've heard you mention before that when you hear about someone who isn't represented or underrepresented in fiction, you try to bring them into your own work.
Mm-hmm.
What have you most been surprised to be not represented or underrepresented?
Honestly, the most surprising thing for me has been the lack of bisexual representation. Like, a lot of straight cis authors, when they realize that maybe all of their characters should not be straight cis people, jump immediately to either gay or lesbian, and anything else is kind of unthinkable. So you'll be told, this book has great rep. And what you find is that great rep is another straight person writing a parody of a gay person. Pansexuality not being very represented doesn't super surprise me because that is such a new concept to many people. But the lack of bi rep has been genuinely shocking.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry. Hey, I know that with a lot of your books, like the Feed series, you went very deep into the research to the point of like frightening the CBC. But I passionately love Into the Drowning Deep and its prequel, and I was wondering if there was any special approach when you're sort of marrying very specific science, because of course most of your characters were scientists, with this sort of fantasy element, whether you had a specific approach to all the information and all the mythology that you built based on history and science and legends and all those elements. And I was also wondering what traditionally benign fantasy creatures you might be willing to ruin next.
I got a couple marine biologists really drunk. And that helped a lot. Into the Drowning Deep, for those of you that are not familiar, is about a reality television production that gets onto a cruise ship and sails out to the Mariana Trench to look for mermaids, and then they find them, and then they are very sorry and regret their life choices. The mermaids in Into the Drowning Deep are as close to biologically realistic as is possible. I consulted with 17 different marine biologists on 3 different continents. I went out on several research boats. I got several of those marine biologists roaringly drunk, and they are way more willing to talk about things that might seem a little questionable when they're completely hammered. Some of the stuff I learned didn't make it into the book, sadly, like the ass fish. There's an entire genus of fish that is specialized to live in the anal tracts of sea cucumbers. And they are so specialized that each fish has a specific species of sea cucumber that it lives in. I know, right? It's ridiculous. A lot of it is, are you starting with the science and building yourself a monster, which is what I did in the Newsflesh trilogy. I started with the science and built a disease. Or are you starting with a monster and building it up? I knew that I needed my mermaids to be skinny because people were going to have enough of a problem accepting realistic mermaids when they already looked like what people think a mermaid looks like. Look at the Disney casting brouhaha. Because if mermaids were mammalian, they would look a lot more like me than like Taylor Swift. You kind of need to have some body fat to survive when you're that far below the ocean. So they couldn't be mammals. And every step was like that. Well, we need them to have hands. We need them to be able to replicate a human voice. What in the ocean that already exists can do these things? My biologists got real tired of me. And I think they want the sequel more than most people do because there's some clownfish biology in those mermaids that y'all haven't seen yet that they are very excited to have come out.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi, thank you so much for being here. I'd be really intrigued to hear your process and how it's different writing for comics, where the characters and the world has already been created and established for decades by various different authors, versus writing your novels and your series where the characters and the worlds are built by you.
Well, I'm originally from the fanfic mines. I literally got my agent because she liked my Buffy the Vampire Slayer porn. Like, that is why she contacted me. And I am a fanfic purist. One of the things that has always been very important to me in my specific writing is making sure that the characters behave in a way that people who actually interface with the original material will recognize. So I do hard AU, but I don't do out of character. And writing comics is basically writing fanfic and getting paid for it, which is kind of magical. Writing a comic script, though, it's a form of structured poetry. Your poem is 20 pages long. You will have between 1 and 12 boxes, 1 and 12 stanzas on each page, and you can fit a certain amount of text that does have an upper limit. And I love structured poetry. I used to play a game called Iron Poet where I would just take suggestions from people, give me 3 words in a poetic form, and I'll write you a poem. I still do limericks as if I were getting paid for it, although I am not. I can turn anything into a limerick. It's terrible. Classic poetry is my favorite. The love song of J. Alfred Prufrock. A man can walk down on the beach, roll his trousers, devour a peach. I am not deluded and won't be included by mermaids that sing each to each. You know, you can do anything. And so I just write poems about spider people kicking supervillains in the ass.
Great, thank you.
Hello.
Hello. So one of the things that I'm always the most impressed about with the October Daye series and with InCryptid is how detailed the world is and how everything links together with little details that come back and are really important 7 books later. I was wondering if you could talk about your process.
I maintain a private wiki. It's not online at all. It's on a thumb drive that I have to plug into the computer I'm using, and everything goes in the wiki. It's really been great. The more books I have out, the more people come to trust me, because it's a little frustrating to have folks go, "You got it wrong." I did not, in fact, get it wrong. I do make mistakes, but I am meticulous. InCryptid, which is an urban fantasy series about basically a pan-folkloric world. Almost every kind of monster or creature from myth or legend that you've ever heard of really exists and is really running around this world. There are no vampires, but everything else is in there. It is the big chicken stew pot of urban fantasy. And there is a species of snake people called Wadjet. They are found on the Indian subcontinent. The females look like women, and the males look like king cobras. This is very distressing for people who meet them. And I have literally dissertations on their biology, but I've had people get mad at me, like actively angry, because Wadjet was an Egyptian snake goddess. Well, the Wadjet didn't call themselves anything but people until humans started slaughtering them and they had to adjust their language. And the Covenant of St. George has wiped out the Egyptian Wadjet. The reason the Indian Wadjet have an Egyptian name is that the people who colonialistically named them encountered them second. It's not an error. So the wikis are great, but sometimes it means people find errors that don't exist, and then I kind of have to pull on my hair like an angry swan from the River Liffey. Hello.
Hi. So one thing that blows my mind about your writing is the culture that exists within your books. You'll frequently quote books that only exist in this universe, and as we go through, we learn more about those books. How do you do that? Do you write those in-text sources first? Is that like a fanfic of your own universe that you create? What's the order that comes in?
Over the Woodward Wall is coming out from Tor next year. So, and I just finished Beside the Saltwise Sea, which is the second in that series. Generally, I will write the entire text before I get started. The same with Don't Go Out Alone. Although Don't Go Out Alone could be considered a fanfic of my work because it was me parodying a song I had previously written. just to get the scansion perfectly. So I can sing all of Don't Go Out Alone, and people frequently ask me to stop doing that. The order is usually shorter thing then longer thing, because that way it all nestles together conveniently. And you have to write it first, or else copy editing on the book can leave you in places where you're like, oh, this is no longer a viable fragment of a larger work. Guess I better go start a new series. And then my editors get really mad at me for some reason. I don't understand it.
Thank you.
Hello.
Hi. I wanted to ask you about representation, sort of a two-part question.
Mm-hmm.
First, the differences in how you might do it in, say, short stories as opposed to novels where your space is more limited. And second, doing it on maybe a more symbolic or metaphorical level as opposed to a more explicit level.
So my short stories are more likely to be all queer white girls running around than anything else, because my short stories have a very high body count. And one of my guiding principles is that you try never to kill the load-bearing lesbian. If you only have one person of a representative group in your work, killing them is a lot bigger of a problem than if you have 12. And that's part of why the Newsflesh books were published under a female-sounding name. My own name is gender neutral, which has helped my sales, but Mira Grant sounds like a woman. Well, it's because I slaughtered so many women in that series. And it was very important that people not assume that that was coming from a place of active misogyny. As for metaphorical representation, I tend to be much more in favor of the big explicit stuff, because otherwise you're trending into Dumbledore territory, and I don't want to get cookies for things I didn't do. Like in Middlegame, which is the book I'm officially here to talk about, I've had a lot of readers ask if Dodger is Arrow Ace. And I think she is, honestly, but she does not actually claim that identity. That's not a place that she has reached with herself. In the book, she hasn't got that kind of self-awareness, and it's never been important enough to her to really think about it, which is frequently a sign that that might be an identity that applies to you. But so I don't feel like Dodger is actually good representation for the ace community. Even if she is ace, until she reaches that conclusion herself and can say it in some way, I'm just trying to get brownie points for something I didn't really do.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi. So I have like two short questions and one long question.
Okay.
So how do you find that you write? Do your characters come to you first, or does the plot come to you first?
It depends on the project. In some cases I get characters and then plot. In some cases I get plot and then characters. Sometimes I get world. The Newsflesh books, I spent literally 2 years talking about the world with no plot and no characters, until my friend Michael, who hosted group dinner every Thursday night, said, if you don't have 10,000 words by next week, you can't eat.
Okay, and are you writing any more Wayward Children books?
We have 5 more under contract. Come Tumbling Down will be out in January, and there are arcs in the wild of that now, so if you manage to get your hands on one, please be nice and don't spoil other readers. And I'm currently working on The Land of Hoof and Horn, which will be the 2021 book.
Okay, and what is your Hogwarts house?
Slytherin.
Me too!
Best house.
I agree. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Though it's super fun when you meet kids and they ask that question. I went to see the Lightning Thief musical in Seattle a couple months ago and ran into some small children in like full Hogwarts gear outside. And with kids, you always want to ask them, what's your house? And the little girl goes, I'm Gryffindor. And I went, that's cool. We need people to check for landmines. I'm Slytherin. And watching the 8-year-old go to, you are evil, is just delightful. And then her mom goes, her little sister's a Hufflepuff, it's fine. Hello.
Hi, so I actually was here just because it was a genre fiction. I happen to be a fan of Into the SpiderVerse. And so
Yay!
I was saddened, I was listening to the soundtrack on the way here actually, so I was saddened when, with the Sony and Marvel thing, is there going to be more Into the SpiderVerse? So you haven't been told, don't work on this.
Well, I have no input on the films at all. I know that Into the Spider-Verse is continuing to be very successful and that Sony still has the rights to make those. So I'm sure that they will do more in that animated universe. As for Marvel Comics, as long as this has elevated Miles and Gwen's profile, I think they're going to keep having Miles and Gwen much more central, which is really nice.
Yeah, no, I have to check out the comics. I really like that movie. I was really sad when they announced it, because that's the one of the really, I just, like, what are they going to do with that? So hopefully more to come.
Hopefully we'll get to see more of the spiders, like Spiders Man, who is a colony of spiders that thinks it's Peter Parker.
Oh, and also more, so I want to see Miles and Gwen and all the alternate spider people point at each other.
I didn't hear the last word.
I want to see all the alternate spider people and Miles point at each other in a circle.
Oh, the same hat thing. Yeah, that's always fun.
There needs to be clones of them, otherwise it won't work.
Cool. Hello.
Hi, how are you?
I am doing well. How are you?
I'm doing great, thank you. I think it's safe to say that most authors write with the goal to entertain their audience.
Mm-hmm.
Authors are also in a position to send a message to their audience, whether it's a positive one or a negative one. Is there a certain message that you attempt to send your audience through your writing?
There is no default. For a very long time, fiction, and especially genre fiction, has presented this idea that all of us should always be able to sympathize with a straight, white, able-bodied Christian male. And cis as well, and no one else really exists. And this has led to gaps in empathy. If you don't show people that everyone is a person, they don't necessarily internalize that the way that they need to. So my goal is that there is no default. Everybody gets to be the protagonist. Everybody gets to be the hero of their own story. It was mentioned in an earlier question, but when someone that I know says, I never see myself in story, I do my best to make someone like them a protagonist very quickly. And that does, people do respond to that. In the Newsflesh series, I have a character named Mahir Gowda, who was the first continental Indian character in a major science fiction franchise published in the Western world, which is ridiculous. And I actually got a call from my editor after the second book came out going, hey, yeah, I know you're working on book 3 and I try not to do this, but you can't kill Mahir. And I'm like, okay, why? Because we were getting letters, like if she kills Mahir, that takes out the load-bearing lesbian. And I said, well, Mahir, I'm not killing Mahir, but I did just wipe out India. Is that okay? And that was actually fine because of the way that people look at numbers. So that is my goal with my fiction. I don't always succeed. You know, no one always succeeds. You will always have messages you didn't realize were going to be there because we all carry these internalized prejudices and these internalized assumptions. My early books have a lot of ableist language in them because I didn't realize those words were ableist. And that can be painful for people who are reading my more recent work and go back to the beginning thinking that they're going to be in the same kind of place. So we all do harm. It's just kind of our job to try to mitigate it.
Thank you very much.
Uh-huh. Hello.
Hi there. As you've been talking, you keep rattling off things like, this series is under contract for 5 books with this publisher, and this other series has got 3 books with this other publisher. Have you always had a fantastically detailed and expansive memory, or have you had to build that skill?
I have the worst memory for people. Like literally, you could come up here and say, I want to take you out to lunch and buy me a meal and spend 2 hours talking to me, and I would not remember you when I saw you in 6 weeks. This has caused the breakup of several relationships. Like literally, I'll be staring into my significant other's eyes and they'll go, Shannon, and I'll go, yes, Dave. Who the hell is Dave? But I remember things that depend on me. You do not depend on me for persistence. You get to exist whether or not I know who you are. Toby and everybody don't. They disappear if I forget about them. And so my memory for fiction and for poetry and for things that affect those things has always been phenomenally solid.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi.
Hi.
I love your Wayward Children series.
Thank you.
Oh, yes. In particular because it addresses the question about what happens when you come back from your epic adventure. So what made you want to write whole stories about what is often just the epilogue of the fantasy series?
So I am a folk musician, although my albums are currently out of print because I can't afford to reprint them. And I wrote a song called Wicked Girls, which is about all of the characters from the Portal Fantasies and what happened to them afterward. And it was the title track of my 3rd album. It was the first single author folk album to be nominated for a Hugo Award. And a couple of years ago, Lee Harris, who is at Tor.com Publishing, contacted me and said, we want you to write a novella. And I said, cool. And he said, we're not going to pay you. And I said, what? Because they were trying a new model where they did not pay advances and you got a larger royalty. And what I heard was, you want me to do work for you and you're not going to pay me? That means you can't tell me what to do. And he said, sure, that is exactly what that means. And I basically tried to, I'm going to novelize Wicked Girls, is what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to use the original existing IP. Because I was always very interested in that question. Why does Dorothy want Kansas? Kansas is pants. Dorothy wants Kansas because Uncle Henry and Auntie Em are there, but once they're in Oz, Kansas is pants. And, why would Wendy leave Neverland? I know it's supposed to be this big symbolic, growing up is great, becoming an adult is great, taxes are great. Childbirth and the death that follows is great. So that is where that came from.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Hello. Sorry.
That's all right.
So in the Wayward Children universe, what world would you have traveled to?
Not one that you have seen as yet, though I would have a very good time in the moors and no one would be happy I was there. Hello.
Hello. As someone who's been so vocal about her personal life and mental and physical health, how do you practice self-care?
Sometimes I practice self-care by going silent because people do not respect boundaries. If you check my Twitter feed for the last couple of weeks, you will see that I was very ill in Ireland and Scotland. And at a certain point, I stopped tweeting because I had been hospitalized. And we thought I was going to die. And I didn't talk about that at all because anytime I mentioned how bad my health was and that I was dealing with it with people who were physically there, I would get all of this unwanted medical advice. The unwanted medical advice actually caused me to get stubborn enough that I delayed going to the hospital for 2 days, which is probably why my blood pressure completely bottomed out and I had a seizure. So it was super fun. My agent is really mad at me because it turns out I hadn't updated my literary will in 5 years. And one of the things that you have to put in there if you have contracts for an ongoing series is who's going to finish that series if you're dead? Surprise! But I lived, so we're okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hello.
Thank you for being here. First of all, I'm an early childhood teacher, and you really intrigued me when you talked about your humble beginnings, because I can relate. Who inspired you to write when there was nothing?
Stephen King.
Stephen King.
He talks about working in the trailer and about having to ask yourself, do I quit writing today so my kid doesn't die of an ear infection? And he had a book out every year the whole time I was a kid. It was magical.
Did you just cover your ears and when people told you it was ridiculous or you can't do it? I understand how hard it is to get published and to keep trying, and you kind of, it's easier, I think, now when you have full support and your things are going well, but...
It's hard. I had a full-time job the whole time I was writing the first 3 Toby books, and I didn't talk about it with people that I didn't think would be supportive, and I wrote an enormous amount of fanfic pornography, which both hones your writing skills, because nothing is wasted, and helped me get an agent, so it worked out.
Well, thank you for being such a light and inspiring so many other people.
Oh, thank you. Okay, we have one last question, then we're almost out of time. Hello.
Hi. So the amount of representation you put in your books means the world to me, and I was wondering if there are eventual plans to write an encrypted novel from Elsie's point of view.
That is my hope. It is not currently under contract. I know those words come up a lot, but right now we have the 2 Sarah books, and then we have 1 book after that that is under contract. So that's up to the sales. I really do want to go from Elsie's POV, because Elsie is a joy and, really irritated. Artie will never have his own POV book because he kind of splits time with Sarah. And that works out well for those 2. Because Sarah, I wrote myself into a corner. The encrypted series, you've got a lot of monsters that look like people and people that look like monsters, and one of them is a species of ambush predator telepaths called the cuckoos, who don't see facial expressions. The next time you're reading a first-person book, think about how many times the narrator says, she smiled, he frowned, he looked confused. It's a lot. It's so many. The editing process on imaginary numbers was like sticking pins in my eyes. Like, oh, someone's smiling. I hate everything. So offloading some of that narration is super important.
Thank you.
Absolutely, thank you. I want to thank you all for coming and sitting through this somewhat rambling Q&A. I see that. There's a very nice person in the front row who keeps showing me how much time we have left, which is good because I was concerned that we wouldn't know. Science fiction, genre fiction, all fiction belongs to everyone in this room. It is very important that you don't let people drive you out of it, and you don't let the gatekeepers of our genre tell you that if you don't find it in yourself to love the dry, dusty, old things that they have built their self-identities on, you're not really a fan. You get to be here even if all you read is Charlaine Harris and Archie comics. There is nothing wrong with loving the things that you love. There is nothing wrong with identifying with the things you identify with. And there is no need to stick with an author or a series, including me, who doesn't let you see yourself reflected. No one's going to be perfect, and I'm not saying throw out everything before 5 years ago, but it's important not to allow yourself to be given a list that you must fulfill to truly belong here. We all belong here. We have been being driven to the margins since the start of genre, but we have always been here. And there are more than 17% of us now. 17% is where we become a threat. So there can always be one woman. There can always be one person of color. There can always be one queer person, and that's okay with the majority because you're not a threat. But once you start actually grouping up and appearing in the numbers that we've always had, then you become scary, and that's when we see things like Gamergate and the Sad Puppies campaign trying to push us out again. We're not gonna go. We've been here long enough to build foundations, we've been here long enough to drive down roots, and we're staying. And that applies to everybody here. If you feel like you don't belong, if you feel like this is not for you, if you feel like genre doesn't love you anymore and doesn't want you anymore, it is not my job to tell you that you're wrong, but you are perhaps misperceiving what's going on. And feel free to reach out to me at any time and I'll tell you that. Also valid. We're at time? We have 2 minutes. Okay, wonderful. Also, please remember that I actually went to college for herpetology. I was a dual major in herpetology and folklore, and worked with animal rescue and husbandry organizations for several years. So when you see me on Twitter saying something like, picking up swans is easy and fun, everyone should do it, maybe take that with a tiny little grain of my experiences are not universal salt. We're going to have a signing up next. It's going to be super, super fun, mostly in the sense that I'm going to scribble on things and try to inhale as much Diet Dr. Pepper as my body can hold over the course of an hour, and then you'll get to see me sprint for the bathroom like I'm Usain Bolt. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Seanan McGuire. This is the National Book Festival. We're having a good time.